Hello and good evening. We're just double checking that it has gone live because we've had some fun recently where it hasn't. We've been talking. We were talking to ourselves for 40 minutes thinking that we were doing a live. So
we were doing interesting as well. It was really good.
Never mind. Lesson learned the hard way. Yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to log on here so I can see the questions as they're coming through.
But tonight we're going to talk all about the power of outdoor play and how that can really benefit children's development.
So we'll just briefly introduce ourselves. So I'm Jennie Johnson, one of the co-founders of My First 5 Years.
And I'm Alistair Bryce, Clegg, the other co-founder of My First 5 Years.
Yeah, and as Alistair said, we're here to talk about the power of outdoor play and what its superpowers are. I thought we could start by just reflecting really, and we are going to slightly give away our age here, but I know every summer holiday, as soon as I got home from school, I was outdoors, and I was outdoors with my brother on my bike, and we'd disappear off for hours on end. And I said to you, did you have a similar experience? And I think the answer was pretty much yes.
Yeah, it was, and we lived somewhere quite rural in the northeast of England, and so we would go off over Grantley's Pond and we'd catch. It sounds like literally like a homeless advert, but we would do that and we would stay out a lot. But there is increasing research that says the children are getting less and less time to play outdoors and be outdoors. Mm-hmm. Partly because of the way that society is moving. Obviously during the pandemic that made a difference, but also around adults' attitudes to outdoor play and the availability of space. So if you live somewhere really urban, mm-hmm. it's about maybe rethinking the concept of what outdoors means, because outdoors really does mean anywhere outside of your dwelling space. Mm-hmm. So you can have some really rich outdoor opportunities in urban environments. It doesn't have to be romping through fields, although it can be. Mm-hmm. You can have equally valuable experiences in both.
I think my experience was very different. So I'm a Salford girl. For anyone that knows the northwest of England, you may have heard of Salford, just outside Manchester. For our wider audience, you won't have a clue, but a very urban area. So I certainly wasn't living the Hovis advert dream. I certainly wasn't. But nonetheless, outdoors and being outdoors was just a massive part of my growing up. So given the fact that there's diminishing access to the outdoors and research is absolutely backing that up, we thought we'd just take the opportunity to really consider the value of outdoor play from the point of view of developing and learning and emotional well-being. So I'm going to shut up for a bit and let you
Well,
lead.
If you think about how humans evolved into the society that we are today, we were literally hunter-gatherers that would live outside and exist outside and grow our communities outside. So we are naturally and physically predisposed to the outdoor environment. And again, you know, it's often talked about, but there is lots of research around how outdoors is really positive for human beings, older ones and younger ones, mental health and development. So actually being in the outside and have a connection with being outdoors and nature is a really positive experience for both adults and children. But also we know that children play differently in the outdoor environment. So it offers different experiences in terms of the openness, the space, the weather, the elements, but also children tend to play with a greater sense of risk. They're often playing further away from an adult. So in a home setting, you'll be playing very close in proximity usually to an adult or in a room nearby, whereas in the outdoors you have that freedom to kind of run, to be independent. So everything you can learn in an indoor environment, you can also learn in an outdoor environment, but also using really natural resources as opposed to the more man-made and manufactured ones that you might use indoors.
I know during the lockdown that we've all lived through recently, my saviour of the day was just getting outside for that walk or that bike ride, or it was never a run, funnily enough. But that, you know, getting the fresh air was just such a key part of the day and sort of survival, really.
Yeah, I don't think really as a species we were meant to live indoors all the time. There's a huge connection to being outdoors and that sense of well-being that you get from making that connection. And again, it doesn't have to be, you know, in meadows or by the sea, and it's brilliant if it can be. You can get that connection even if all you've got is a balcony.
Absolutely, and actually that was one of the questions, bizarrely. One of the questions that came through as a pre-ask was that this lady lives in a flat and she would like to know what she can do to make the most of the outdoors.
I think if you can access an outdoor space, be that a park or an open space that's obviously safe for your children to go in and play, There are some benefits from having that larger space to allow that gross motor movement. And also for children, the ability to use a louder voice. Because again, especially in pandemic, when we're all on a Zoom saying, shush, I'm on a Zoom.
I'm working.
Yeah, I'm working. Children need that opportunity to really use that big voice in an inappropriate way, and also the space to move. So finding big spaces can be great. But if you want children to experience some of the aspects of outdoors and you've only got a small balcony space, you can think about the different sorts of outdoor experience you want children to have. So the sensory experience, which can just be opening the doors on a windy day or a rainy day and feeling that weather on your skin. But also if your balcony is big enough, thinking about what you might plant that might attract animals, insects, butterflies, making things like bird feeders that might attract birds to come and kind of, feed on your balcony so you can observe them. But also things like on a windy day, if you get a carrier bag or a paper bag and tie a bit of string or wool to one handle and let it catch the wind and then let it go, obviously keep hold of the string, and you make things like a paper bag or a plastic bag kite, making sure that you pull your plastic bag in and dispose of it responsibly. Or when you are on rainy days, if you've got tins that you've used at home and you take the label off and then put them so the open side is down and the closed side is facing up where the rain can hit them, tins of different sizes will make different noises. So even if you've got a leaky gutter and you can put a tin underneath, you can create your own music just by using found objects like tins that will make noises in the rain. So that links to the fact that weather is creating the sound, but also really helps children in terms of their listening and just their interest and curiosity as to why things happen as they do.
I think as well they're great spaces for observing.
Yeah.
So looking at the different seasons, looking at what's changing, just silly little things. I'm trying to remember the name of the game and I don't think it's going to come to me now that we're on a live, but we used to count different coloured cars, but then we had really stupid names for the colours. So there was Bananarama was a yellow car and all that good stuff. Just lots of different crazy elements
and
that you can...
It's encouraging children to use their observation skills and their listening skills, which will all come in useful later on. And also, if you are on a balcony and you're raised, you have a different view of the world. So lots of children who've never been on a balcony look at the world from floor level. But if you are up in a balcony, you're looking down, so it gives you a very different perspective. So there's all sorts of different things you can build in that just help you to embrace a little bit of being outdoors.
But moving on to the more sort of traditional outdoors, as in outdoors in an open space or outdoors in an urban setting but walking around, there are so many opportunities as well to just get outside your front door.
There are, and we talk a lot when we're out and about, often about landscapes. And again, when you say landscape, you tend to think about hills and mountains, but there's also a lot of landscape involved in cities and urban environments. But also a term that we use a lot in early years is soundscape. And the idea of that is you're not looking at the rolling hills and the fields and the trees. It's about using your ears to create that soundscape of the different noises that you can hear. And again, that can be about shutting your eyes in a safe space and really tuning into what you can hear and playing that game with your children about I can hear, what can you hear? And even the old classic of lying on your back and looking at the clouds and spotting shapes is not only good for developing imagination, but also when you are training your children's brains to be able to pick out shapes and recognise shapes within things. So if you imagine when you're reading and you have to recognise letters within words, that skill starts by being able to pick out recognisable shapes within other shapes. And cloud gazing is not only good for a million kind of reasons around nature, it's also really good for those early reading skills.
I think we've all got memories of fun things that we used to do outdoors. So mine and my brothers, I've got a younger brother, and we used to just love finding a hill and rolling down it, and that sensation in your stomach and the excitement of rolling down the hill, as long as you didn't find any dog poo on your way down.
This is very true, but also that rolling down the hill is really good for developing your lymphatic system and also your balance. So in the vestibular system, all of the things that you do that are good fun are often linked to other bits of development. And just that proprioception, which we talk about a lot in our lives, the idea of being able to control your body in the space that it's in. And I know within our app we do lots of ideas, activities and interactions, and a lot of those will have a link to something you can also do outdoors. So it gives you an idea of things you can pick up and do with very limited resources, because the brilliant thing about outdoors is all the stuff that you need, or a lot of the stuff that you need, as long as somebody's giving you the seed of an idea, is basically there. You don't have to take a lot of things with you.
I think there's a saying, and again I'm not going to remember it when we're live, but it's about the outdoors is limited only by your imagination.
Yes, this is true.
I can't remember the rest
That's
of the
an
saying.
inspirational saying. Thank you for sharing it.
But it is true. You can just your mind can just go off. Another memory I have, a really strong memory and a really happy memory of childhood, was going out for walks in Salford with my dad. I need to set myself and my brother little challenges, and it'd simply be things like somebody run off and find a metal gate, a number 4 and a car that's red, touch all 3 of them and run back, and we do that and race back and just literally go out for an hour or 2 running around the streets of Salford like demons trying to beat each other back to my dad.
And it is about that gameplay, it's about that interaction, it's about that enjoyment. You know, we've talked before in our lives about the idea that children, a bit of boredom's not a bad thing, and what an outdoor space initially can appear to provide is nothing, but then children get really attuned to the space that they're in and begin to find things to do within that space. But also, we've seen loads of imaginary play where you can make leaves into stick puppets, you can just have sticks that have their role to play in the little imaginary games. So lots of things that will develop all of children's kind of cognitive, social, emotional, speech and language, gross motor, fine motor development, you can find in a fairly small outdoor space.
We've got someone just popped up here called Andrew saying that his son loves to collect and bring back twigs, flowers, cones and big leaves, and they've got a massive selection at the front door now. But what his son wants to do next is to make a bug hotel.
Excellent.
I love bug hotels.
So,
tell us what they are.
So a bug hotel basically is a place where bugs can come, obviously for like a spa weekend. So the idea is that you create a space in your outdoor area, and it can be really small, that attracts bugs, because there's nothing worse than when children go out looking for mini beasts and they can't find any anywhere. Now, the best bug hotels I've seen, to be fair, are just big piles of sticks and various bits of other kind of leafy undergrowth in a fairly shady place that allows them to stay cool and get a little bit damp. Because often the ones that you see that you can buy online are amazing and look like beehives. I've never seen any bugs come and live in them because we often put them in too sunny a place, so it's too hot for the bugs. But those natural piles of sticks and things that you collect can be brilliant spaces just for the woodlouse, the earwigs and all those different bits and pieces.
And it is sometimes difficult. I have a real fear of woodlice, trying to not pass those fears on when you see them and trying to remain excited.
Yeah, because no child was born afraid of a woodlouse or a spider. So when we pass on our fear, and it is really hard if you have got that genuine fear, but it's also, like it's another life, it's okay to articulate that fear to your children and explain that you know that it's not a rational fear and that you know this thing can't hurt you. But yeah, it's trying to just swallow it down and move on.
Be a good example.
Yeah.
So another good question here linked to outdoor play. How can I support a child to play outdoors when they don't like mess? And I'm just going to add a second question that kind of carries on along the theme. My 2-year-old is obsessed about having clean hands and won't play with sand, Play-Doh, paint, mud, anything like that. But parents saying here, in fact parents called Sam, is saying her older 2 children love getting messy. So she doesn't think it's her as a parent that's passed that on, that just her child thinks differently about mess.
Okay, so outdoor play obviously doesn't have to be all about mess, but there is a messy element to outdoors, and some children don't like getting messy. So it could just be that it's often more linked to a sensory experience, so they don't like the feeling of for whatever reason, the mud on their hands or the sand on their fingers. Because, I mean, the best of us are not keen when you've been to the beach and you suddenly try to dry yourself down with a towel and the sand's stuck everywhere. So it could just be that, and I think what you can do then is keep providing those experiences, but keep modelling that as an adult or with siblings that you are enjoying it and it's okay, but I would never push a child into doing anything that they don't want to do. But also a lot of outdoor play doesn't have to be messy. But then having said that, some children love the mess of the outdoor play, and I know that it's sometimes the adults that will say, oh, careful, or don't get yourself dirty, or don't get that muddy, or that's your new coat, don't be going in there. So I think also when we're using outdoors to the best that we can, we just need to make sure that we dress for outdoors. And really, if your children are going to play appropriately in the outdoors, they're likely to get very messy. So if your child doesn't like getting messy, there are other things that you can do, but if they do, you need to kind of expect that they will. And I certainly remember with my 3 boys who did, most of the time when you came back, I think I might have mentioned it before, that my dad used to have bin bags in the boot of his car and get the boys to step in to the bin bag and then just strap them in a bin bag like a caterpillar in the back of the car, because they were just covered every time we went out.
I think realistically, if you're going to really enjoy the outdoors, like you say, you're going to come back a little bit messy. So if you're going for a walk in the park or you're meeting up with friends in the park, it's probably not the day to wear your very best coat and your very best shoes and your very best clothes. And you do quite often see that, and then you'll often see parents say, please don't, please don't. And we know that it's just so natural for most children to want to roll about and get a bit messy and get a bit muddy, and it's good to allow it where you can.
And even parents saying things like, put down that stick, it's dirty, and then that kind of conditions children into, obviously you've got to be careful what your child is picking up and the age of your child. The idea of saying put that down, it's dirty, means the children then won't pick anything up because there is a fear of getting dirty. We don't want children to necessarily be spooning spoonfuls of mud into their mouth, but there's also really good research about children who play in the outdoors really help to build their immune system, because there are lots of harmless bugs that are in soil and dirt and just generally being outside that actually do strengthen children's immune system without having any negative effects. But children who never get the opportunity to do that don't get that strengthening. So there is some real positive to that kind of getting stuck in play.
Another question here is about mud kitchens. And first of all, we can maybe explore what a mud kitchen is, because not everybody would know what a mud kitchen is or have come across the term. But then also exploring, well, do mud kitchens need to have mud in them? What else can they have in them? But the specific question around the mud kitchen here is, do I need to buy safe dirt for the mud kitchen? Okay,
so I'll give you my thoughts on mud kitchen. Mud kitchens are really popular, and you'll see them advertised for humongous amounts of money in parenting catalogues, and also lots of schools and nurseries will have mud kitchens. And I think the idea of a mud kitchen is basically a space where children can experiment with mud. I think for me, what I am always wary of is when you say to a child, this is a mud kitchen, the fact you've called it a kitchen already outlines your expectation for what their play is going to be. And subconsciously for them, they're thinking kitchen play. And that's not really what we want for our children. So certainly in schools and settings that I've worked with, we talk about more having an investigation station, partly because it rhymes and children like the rhyme. But the idea is for both the parent, the adult and the children, if you're calling it an investigation station, it suddenly broadens the possibilities of what you might do. Because what you often get in a mud kitchen is, I'm the mum, you're the dad, I'm making the tea, or vice versa, which is lovely play, but you tend to get that whether they're 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or 7, because the kitchen invites that kind of play.
Yeah.
So if you call it investigation station, suddenly it's not about pots and pans necessarily and making the tea. It becomes about investigating the environment. So things like, well, anything you want to do, clay stations, pebble potion, all that kind of thing, as well as your mud play. And you don't need clean mud for a mud kitchen. What you need to make sure is that you don't use compost, because compost is very aerated, so it doesn't make that lovely gloopy mud that we want. And as long as you're careful about where you take your mud from, then and make sure that there's not anything untoward in it, then you should be okay using mud that's readily available for the children. But also, if you're going to have any kind of investigation station, then ideally they've got access to the soil that they can dig themselves, which is great in terms of gross motor, fine motor, experimentation, sensory, smell, touch, all that kind of stuff. And then access to water so that they can add as much or as little as they want to change the consistency of the mud that they're mixing. But also adding in things like gravel, bark chippings, petals, leaves, grass cuttings, anything like that that's going to give them a sensory experience is fine.
Yeah, and I think as well, when you remove that connotation of it being a mud kitchen, then it doesn't need to look kitcheny either, because quite often these bought mud kitchens can look and are expensive. Whereas if it's just an investigation station, it can be a table outside with anything on there. And
there is research, I know start loads of sentences out, but there is research around how children construct an image of gender and also that for some children, depending on how they've been exposed to that kind of gender role, the kitchen is very much seen as belonging to a particular gender type and a particular sort of play. So you tend to get some children who will avoid the mud kitchen because they think it's a bit more like home domestic play, and that's not what they're into. And you get other children who will dwell a lot in the texture kitchen because it's very familiar play to them. And what we want is to really celebrate the familiar play for children that gives them a high level of well-being, but also give them an opportunity to extend that play and think beyond making the tea.
So water play is another brilliant thing to take outside, because it can be tricky to do water play indoors. It's quite good when you're in the bathroom and the bath, but not necessarily something you want to be doing in the living room on the carpet. But what's the value of water play, and what sort of simple things could parents do outside to sort of get that value and that learning opportunity?
So in your own outdoor space, so whether that be your patio, your garden, your balcony, within reason, because obviously the people living underneath you on your balcony where they're washing out and you're engaging in water play might not be popular. But there's the fact that children experience water in a very different way. So they're able to move it, they're able to stem its flow, they're able to pour it, they're able to experiment with cause and effect. So when I do this, how does this respond? And also, if we think about water more as fluid rather than water, and we think about the fact that you can have ice, especially if you leave things out in the winter that freeze, but you can also mix things into water to make it a more kind of a thicker consistency, so therefore it moves in very different ways when that happens. But also the whole experiment around pouring from one vessel into another. Also, when my boys were little, we used to play a game called Plop, which is not as bad as it sounds. And Plop was basically about having just a bucket full of water and finding different size objects to drop into the water and see how big a plop you could make. And then they figured out if they stood on a stool and dropped from a height, they got an even bigger plop. And so we got this effect of dropping big stones and all sorts of things into water with a big splash, which is all about cause and effect, all about early science. But that was all just done with a big bucket of water and a couple of garden chairs, and they just went around finding different things to drop into the water. So there are very simple things you can do that really link to their early investigation of the world around them in science. And the other thing that's useful, is that give them things to think about. So I was in the outdoors, gave my boys access to the hose and the tap, and they had to turn the tap on and off and turn the hose on and off. Always it degenerated into one of them squirting the other one, who would then cry because they didn't want to be squirted. It usually started quite well. But the idea of them managing that is really good for their social emotional development and also being in control. But also the idea of don't put your water plane next to the source of water, which sounds a little bit counterintuitive. But if the children have to work out how to get the water from the tap across the patio or to the other side of the garden where the water play resources are, then they've got to think about that strategy for filling and emptying, transport, and so all of those things really help to develop their thinking.
Another one just popped into my mind that we used to play a lot of, which was obstacle courses, and it was always just logs and sticks and that sort of thing, but we'd create obstacle courses and race around those. But it was just that physicality of getting out of breath, getting sweaty, all that, getting your heart rate racing, and
we used to do one with our
really
boys,
good memories.
3-legged races down the garden, where you just get a pair of tights and you put 2 legs in one leg of a pair of tights, and then they have to try to see if they can walk in that. So again, I'm not suggesting you whip your tights off in the park, but you could go, pre-armed with an old pair of tights. Anything, that's about us very much introducing an adult resource element to a game, which you can do, but actually there's lots that happens in the outdoors that you don't need to bring that adult element. So you don't need to take your Duplo to the park. If you want to focus on construction in an outdoor space, encourage children to find things to construct with that they can find in the outdoors, as opposed to kind of taking it with you. Because constructing with logs and twigs and whatever it may be is a very different experience to that kind of geometric brick that stacks one on top of the other. Both are valuable, but there's no need to take the indoor stuff out. You should really try and embrace the outdoor stuff.
Yeah, there's a comment just come through that it's somebody else talking about the fact that they have a water butt, so they're using recycled water, but again they keep it away from the play items so that they're having to figure out how to transport it. So it's just another element to the sort of learning and decision making that's going on.
I've got my pointy finger out. And water butts are brilliant but just make sure that you flush your water butt regularly, because if you let
standing
water
water.
stand,
Yeah.
then children end up either drinking it or just licking their hands, whatever they do when they've been pouring it. It can be poorly, but if you just flush it through with something safe like Detox or Milton regularly, they're a brilliant thing to use.
Cool. Sinking and floating is another great one with water. Just, stones will sink and leaves will float and all that good stuff. So, right, aprons a mess. Are you laughing about my ideas?
It's like every day's a school day with you.
Literally. I learn all the time, all day, every day. Aprons, and whether they are a good idea or a not so good idea.
So I'll give you my opinion on aprons. I think Jennie and I have talked about this before. There's often a parental or adult need to get a child into an apron before they go and do any kind of inverted commas messy activity. And the majority of children that I have spoken to in my 30 years and early years do not like wearing an apron, because they can often be scratchy. The very thin ones don't stop them from getting wet anyway. If somebody else has had the apron on beforehand or it's not dried out properly, they're putting their arms into soggy plasticky apron. They're quite restrictive. They can't fasten the back, so they flap about. And also it gets in the way of their inspiration and enthusiasm when you're saying, stop, wait, I put an apron on. So I would say most of the time I wouldn't see aprons as being a necessity. If you are happy for your children to get dirty, because when you are learning skills and when you are experiencing new things and you are between the ages of 0 and 5, you're likely to get dirty doing them, because nobody ever said, I'm going to just sit quietly in this corner and colouring neatly. Especially when you're outdoors, you're going to want to be poking about and looking under those plant pots and kneeling down on the soggy grass, which is how you discover that you don't kneel down on soggy grass, because it makes your knees all cold and wet. So for me, I would say no to aprons, because I think they inhibit more than they actually do anything to protect children. And I think it's often about adults wanting children to stay clean. I think it's probably better to get children in comfortable clothes that they are happy to move about in and try and take a change. Unless, of course, you haven't got access to things like laundry services, washing machines on a regular basis, and you need to keep your children clean, that's slightly different. But other than that, I think it's a good thing to let children experience the cause and effect of interacting with their environment.
Another one here, my child complains about being cold and doesn't want to play outside. What can I do to help her?
So layers is the answer, because what you get, and it's classic, they're cold, so you wrap them up like, they're literally going to the Antarctic, they're outside for 30 seconds, and then they're going, I'm really hot, can I take my coat off? Or you'll get some children who are the opposite to that, who never put their coat on. And loads of parents I talk to, and again, my sister-in-law is one of these parents that has coat off shame, where everybody over the age of 50 is saying that child needs a coat, that child needs, like, I ask him to put his coat on, he won't put his coat on, and he's not put his coat on forever. So I think there are some children that just don't need, because they don't feel the cold in the same way that we do. If you've got a child who feels cold when they go outside, then part of it is about what they're doing in the outside. If it's a very sedentary experience and it's cold, then they're going to get cold. Yeah. But if they've got lots of layers on that you can add on to and take off, hats, scarves, gloves, gilets, coats, if you've got that kind of stuff available, then that can sometimes solve your problem. Because there is that infamous quote that we'll now misquote about there's no such thing as bad weather, just inappropriate clothing. So the idea is rain, hail, sleet or snow, we can be out there experiencing that weather as long as we've got clothes on that keep us safe and warm. One
of the biggest joys I have with my 11-year-old, we live in Manchester, so it rains a lot, and it can have really heavy rain sometimes that's bouncing off the floor. And that is our favourite time to go out for a walk, and we just stick our waterproofs on and we're out, and we absolutely love it.
But there's something about being under a hood when the rain's really coming down heavy and you can hear it all in your ears, that is a little bit magical.
Yeah, no, absolutely love it. So a question that's come through, slightly challenging the apron thing, but I think we can cover it because it's a bit of a misunderstanding, is that I always thought it made sense to put the all-in-one waterproofs on for outdoor play. Now, obviously on a cold day, that makes sense because you don't want to get wet and cold, and those things that go from top to bottom like a big coat,
like
aren't
they?
Yeah. Then they, of course, make sense. But I would say on a warm or a hot day, again, back to the no need for the waterproofs, no need for the aprons, experience the wet, you know, you're not going to get cold and miserable.
So I'm with you. I wouldn't have called those an apron, which is probably where
Yeah.
the misunderstanding comes. I would call those a waterproof and all-in-one. We did a really lovely live with Muddy Puddles that do some lovely examples of that kind of all-weather clothing for children. So yeah, absolutely. If it's tipping down, if you're going somewhere that's really covered in mud, if you want your children to do some mud sliding down the embankment, then I would absolutely stick with all-in-ones on. But then, as Jenny is saying, it's the idea that lots of parents will put their children into aprons to do anything remotely muddy. And now by an apron, I'm kind of thinking of the two arms in, fastened at the back.
Yeah.
So yeah, different definitions of the same sort of thing, but definitely those kind of all-weather all-in-ones can be really useful.
Just got a comment here from a Children's Day nursery talking about the fact that they let their parents know, they're very transparent with them, that children are going to get messy, and that it is the sign that they've had a fabulous and amazing day. And I would certainly, as a previous owner of a nursery, agree with that when we were showing parents around, we told them what our ethos was. You know, we told them we don't use aprons, we told them they can free flow outdoors and indoors every day, and yeah, they're going to look messy at the end of the day, but that means they've had probably the best day ever.
Yeah, and also within that, and we haven't really kind of talked about this a lot yet, which is very much an element of outdoor, is that we want our children to be able to take risks and to have that sense of stepping outside of their comfort zone. And for some children, that is around the opportunity to engage with the mess. It's also about the balancing and the jumping and all those things, the climbing, so that they get that little gentle knot in their stomach that says, oh, this is a bit new, can I do this, can I not do this? But risk is different for different children, and I think part of the risk that you can, or the risk taking you can do outdoors, is just behaving slightly differently and getting dirty as part of your play. But one of the big things that we love about outdoor play is it allows children to develop. We are going to do a live all about risky play, but it allows children to develop a sense of risk. Because again, there's a load of research that shows that if children don't have the opportunity to develop a sense of risk when they are young, when they get older and they're faced with opportunities that involve an element of risk, so I'm thinking like teens, which are one of the most dangerous time that children go through, and we both know that, is that they are far less equipped to make good decisions because they haven't, and that I'm talking about literally being able to jump between two stones, to climb up a slide and slide down, to manage that feeling of this is what I'm going to do, I'm going to think it through, am I going to do it, oh I did it, it was all right in the end, or I did it and it wasn't all right in the end because of this and this. Regular opportunity to go through that process means that as they are older, they're better cognitively able to take risk, and that's what we want.
Yeah, when I took my little one, my last little one to the park, and I really started to understand the benefit of a bit of risk and let them figure things out for themselves, I was that parent that stood back and let them do things for themselves. And again, a bit like your sister-in-law was saying, she can be misunderstood about the fact a child doesn't wear a coat. I think as a parent that stands back, you can sometimes be misunderstood as someone that's not engaging. Yeah. But I mean, I would never go on my phone. I wasn't there in the park going on my phone doing other things. I was watching from a distance, but I was really letting her figure it out for herself, and I knew the benefits of that. And I think one of our little mantras here is the more we do for them, the less children learn. And being able to step back a bit and let them explore.
And again, we've talked about this before, but both of us have used this in previous roles, the idea of the kind of be careful challenge, where you say to parents, can you try and say something other than be careful, be careful, be careful? And because we do it all the time, because we want to protect our children, absolutely we do. But sometimes we say it when we don't need to, because it's just meeting our own insecurity. And what we don't offer is alternatives or reasons why they need to be careful. So it can make children really risk averse, because they've got this mantra of be careful, I need to be careful, I don't know what I need to be careful of, I just need to be careful. So we'll talk about this when we do our Risky Play Live, but the idea of there are other things that you can say that enable play rather than disable play, but still give children that opportunity to be in the outdoors and take a risk.
Cool. Well, yet again, the time has flown by. Can you believe it?
No.
So just finishing, I guess, and not like digging back into the whole subject, but just summarising on why we're so passionate about the outdoors being beneficial. What are the big takeaways that you hope parents will take away after listening to this?
I think we need to think about human beings and how we originated as a species, and the fact that we've got an innate link to the outdoors, so it is beneficial to us both physically and mentally. The outdoors cost you nothing, and children can learn loads with absolutely no resources other than the ones that they find in an outdoor space. And the outdoors offers children an opportunity to do play differently and experience the world differently than being indoors. And that's a really valuable experience, even not just around the risk, just around being in the space. So the more we can get children outdoors to have that experience of the world, in control, have a bit of power, experience cause and effect, experience a little bit of boredom and a lot of creativity, that can only benefit their journey as a learner.
And we've done a free guide
that
you can download from the bio. So the bio on Instagram has got a free downloadable guide just to give you a bit more of the depth behind the power or the superpower of outdoor play. So thanks very much everyone again for joining us. And our next live is on Tuesday the 19th, back to noon, just because of the evening commitments that we've both got that night. And it's about
not together,
not together, about becoming a friend. So yes, we look forward to exploring all about friendships in the early years.
Thanks everybody. See you soon.